Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of our Farm Quick Conversation series. As a reminder, this series is an opportunity for the farm program to connect different members of the farm team and other subject matter experts to dairy farmers and our farm participants on a variety of initiatives and program areas that the farm program is focusing on. And with this week being National Safety Week, we are focusing on a safety spotlight and safety training, and I'm excited to be joined by Dr. David Douphrate. Before we get started though, I do want to remind folks that the purpose of these conversations is really to give you as listeners an opportunity to ask questions and to interact. So to do just that, there's two different options. If you're on the Zoom side, you can go ahead and type those questions in the chat feature or the Q&A box. And if you're over on Facebook, or you're listening in on Facebook, just type those questions in the comment box, and we'll have a few moments at the end of our session today to discuss those questions. So before we get started, Dr. Douphrate, would you like to take a moment just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this question and answer session. My name is Dave Douphrate. I'm an associate professor at the University of Texas School of Public Health, which is located in Houston, but we have campuses all over the state. And so I'm located at the San Antonio campus. And the reason why I guess I was asked to do this is because a lot of my research and outreach service is focused in the dairy industry. And so I've have many years experience working in the dairy industry, looking at specific safety issues, safety hazards, and working with producers to come up with solutions to not only protect workers from injuries and fatalities, but also coming up with methods to let them do their jobs more effectively and productively. And so I look forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Dr. Douphrate. We're definitely excited to have you here and very appreciative for the support that you've given the farm program so far in a variety of our initiatives and programs. So just to kick us off, starting at the very basics, could you give us just a broad overview of what is safety training and the different types of safety trainings we see specifically on dairy farms?
Yeah, good question. So I don't really like to separate out safety training specifically because safety training should be a component of just overall job training. So whenever a worker comes onto a farm, a new worker, they're going to be told or instructed and trained how to do the job effectively, whether it's milking cows or helping out in the maternity area, in the feeding operations. They are being trained on how to do the job. Part of that training should include how to do the job in a safe manner. And so that training should include, how to recognize the hazards associated with the job or even the task and what might happen, what could happen, and then teaching those workers how to do it in a safe manner and how to protect themselves on the job. Not only to protect themselves, but also to protect others on the job. So they should be looking out for coworkers on the farm. I think the second question that you asked was different mechanisms or modes of delivery of safety training. There's a lot of options out there, and it should be based on what the situation is at hand and what the topic is. We like to refer to two different types of training, synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is basically the type of interaction that we're having right now. It's live. You have a trainer in front of a group, or maybe it's one-on-one, that they are delivering training during that moment. Asynchronous training is another method where you deliver training, but it's not live. And so it may be that they're reading a book, a safety manual, watching a video, a recorded video, or going online and looking at something on the internet, watching a video on the internet. We have employed a number of different mechanisms of training. We go out and deliver live safety training to workers. We also have utilized mobile devices, iPads, to where we have pre-recorded training sessions on there, and we give workers earbuds, and we'll bring them into a conference room and they can listen and watch their own specific safety training right there in the conference room. And so it's self-paced and they can go through the training themselves. So there's a number of different, ways to deliver safety training. It just depends on what the topic is and really what resources you have available at the time.
Thanks. And you spoke a little bit about this, and dairy farmers already have a lot on their to-do list, and so it's hard to prioritize. And so maybe can you share just a little bit more about specifically why safety training is so important and should be a priority at the farm level?
Sure. I take the approach that any employer, not just dairy employers, but any employer, any business, they want their workers to be productive. They want them to be successful and efficient, as well as safe on the job. And so part of that is making sure that they're doing the job the way that you want them to do the job. They're looking out after the specific details of the job and basically what are the expectations. And so one of those expectations is to do the job safely. And especially when you have a novice worker that has never worked on a dairy farm, you need to explain to them that there are hazards on the farm. There are exposures that could be detrimental to their health, whether it's operating machinery, the cow itself, chemicals on the farm. They need to know what those hazards are, what can happen if they were not handling the chemical properly, or if they were not handling the cow properly, or even the machinery. And so they need to be informed, they need to be trained, they need to be educated as to how to do the job in a safe manner. And I would like to even add that, I consider there being a difference between training and education. Training can be looked at, you're just telling them how to do the job. But education, you're going one step further and you are explaining to them the whys as to why you're asking them to do the job in a manner that you're asking. And so part of that is there's a reason why they should wear a mask when they're handling a certain chemical, or there's a reason why you want to stand in a certain position to get a cow to move a certain direction. It's not only to get the cow to move a certain way, but it's also to protect the worker health and safety, but also to protect the cow health and safety. And so explaining the whys is very important. So I consider it safety education.
Now, those are all fantastic points. Looking beyond it being the right thing and the best thing for your operation to implement safety training regularly, if we break it down, what are the requirements and the expectations from OSHA regarding safety training?
So good question. So OSHA does have some specific training requirements. So dairy farms fall under what we call the general industry, which is a specific sector that that OSHA likes to compartmentalize or classify different types of businesses. And so there are, under that general industry, there are specific different types of hazards. And so under those specific hazards in the standards or the rules and regs that OSHA has set forth, they have specific training requirements. For example, what OSHA refers to as hazard communication, basically it is chemical management. So any chemicals that are being used on a farm, OSHA requires that workers to be trained in the hazards associated with those specific chemicals. How to protect themselves. Do they need to be wearing gloves or a certain type of glove, a certain type of mask? How do they store those chemicals? And anytime a worker goes into a specific area that is using a new chemical or a chemical that they have never used before, OSHA requires that they be trained in that. And so there's a whole slew of machinery. They ask that workers be trained in safe operation of that machinery. OSHA does have two specific agriculture training requirements. One of those being related to machine guarding of machinery, specifically power takeoff apparatus on the back of a tractor, that those should be shielded, guarded, and workers need to be trained on that. The second one that is specific for agriculture is rollover protection. And so workers need to be trained on to respect the need of rollover protection on machinery to make sure that they are installed and that they should not be operating any type of farming equipment without the rollover protection. So those are specific to agriculture. There are only two. But then all of the other ones that are applicable to general industry, which dairy would fall under, so they do require that. So if you go and look up under OSHA, OSHA has published a document called Training Requirements and OSHA Standards, and they outline all of the different specific training requirements for different type of hazards. And all you need to do is look under that list and find the ones that are applicable on dairy farms, and you can find, what you need to know as far as training your workers.
Perfect. Those are great next steps for the follow-up for the website. Kind of along those same lines, if there's a farmer that's looking for resources or a starting place to either build upon their current safety training or implement something new starting from scratch, where would you direct them and recommend them to find those resources?
Yeah, I would refer to OSHA. They have another great document called, I've got it pulled up here, the Resource for the Development and Delivery of Training to Workers. And so it outlines all the different aspects of the development of a quality safety training program for any type of business. It can be any other type of business. And so it goes through, recognizing what are the training needs. That means you have to go out and recognize, well, what are the hazards on the farm? What are the pressing issues on the farm that I need to address? Another aspect is, okay, who are my learners? Who are those that will be participating in my training sessions? And so part of it is asking the workers, hey, how do you prefer to go through a training session? And what is the most effective way of training? And that's really the biggest challenge in developing a safety training program is asking yourself the question, is my training really effective? And then that means you have to really define what is training effectiveness. Do you just want them to answer a test at the end of a training session? Do you want them to provide a return demonstration? Do you want them to be able to demonstrate the proper work techniques on a consistent basis? And so whenever there are a lot of businesses that are out there that provide safety training, I always encourage businesses, not just dairy, but all businesses, to really ask the really tough questions. Hey, how are you documenting your training effectiveness? Are you delivering in your safety training what you are advertising? And so that's a big deal. And I know many dairy producers out there get frustrated with trainings. We have what we call procedural drift or milking drift or other types of drift, to where workers will perform at the level that you want them to perform, but over time they drift back to their old ways of doing things. And you have to ask the question, was my training effective? Did I deliver the training in a manner that they even understood? And so those are questions to ask. And so I would really encourage the listeners on this to really ask those critical questions. Is the training really effective? Are we engaging or developing a training program that is proven to be effective? And so sometimes that takes a long process to figure that out, but you can get there.
Can you build upon that a little bit more and talk about the specifics of that effectiveness and what you should be measuring when you look back at once you've completed a training and look at your employee pool and measure there?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, so there's a framework that I use. It's called the Kirkpatrick Model. And so basically there are different levels of training effectiveness evaluation. So whenever I go in and do a safety training to a business, I try to engage these different levels of training effectiveness. The level one being, what was the learners, what is their impression of the environment? Did they like the setting that they were sitting in? Was the air conditioner and the environment working well? Did they like the pizza? Did they like the presenter? Did they like the content? That's just a level one reaction. Level two is basically based on a what we call a pre-test and a post-test, knowledge gain. So we'll give them a simple test before the training to basically establish a baseline. What do they know? And then we give a post-test after the training to see if they've raised their scores in the knowledge. Now, knowledge is one thing, but actually going out and applying it on the job is another. And so are they actually doing what you train them to do? That would be a level 3 evaluation. And that's a little bit more difficult to evaluate. And so one approach is to maybe ask them to do a return demonstration. Let's say it's going through the milking routine. Ask them to demonstrate the proper milking sequence, what to look for, how to properly clean the udder, how to properly stimulate the cow, how to properly attach the milking unit, how to identify signs of mastitis on a cow. All of those can be a return demonstration. Then following up on that, you might want to go out there and just observe them over time. And maybe that's on a daily basis, weekly basis, or have multiple people evaluating that return demonstration. So everybody is evaluating each other to eliminate that possibility of procedural drift. Level 4, as it relates to safety training, that would be the actual reduction of injuries or illnesses or even fatalities on the job. So if your goal is to reduce injuries on the job, then that's something that you want to evaluate. But that takes, as it relates to worker health and safety, that can take time because a lot of places don't experience injuries or fatalities very often. And so you want to establish what your injury and illness rates are before training program is implemented, and then evaluate for a certain period of time after the training program. And so that would be a level 4. Level 5, which is much more difficult, would be a cost benefit analysis. Is it what we're paying for in a training program? Is it cost effective? Is it cost effective in reducing injuries or reducing somatic cell counts or mastitis or any other type of outcome that you're trying to address with training?
Great, and just from my animal science and animal care programming background, it's just want to highlight the connections you see there between training and safety training, as well as implementing the priorities that we have and the other program areas within the farm program. So for folks that are building out this training program and training opportunities, what would be some proactive ways they could go about? What challenges should they be aware of as they're proactively planning these to keep in mind during that planning process?
I've learned got some feedback there. I've learned the hard way when developing safety training for many businesses, including dairy, is never assume anything going in. You really want to know who your audience is. Who are the learners? And in this case, dairy workers. At present, the demographics, those workers that are in dairy is changing. And so they are coming from different parts or different countries right now. Mexico, we're having an increasing percentage of workers from Central America. And they come from different educational backgrounds. We cannot assume that these workers can read or even write. And so the presentation of our training materials need to take that into consideration. I've been to many places where they have given training materials to workers that and just had them read the material. And oftentimes workers that were having difficulty reading the material. And so we cannot assume that. And so that's why we started going to different mechanisms of training delivery to where we are putting training materials in their native languages. And we're asking them to watch videos in those native languages. And so they're seeing different ways of performing different tasks on the job in their native language. So it really makes it a lot more effective in that delivery. And so, the language barrier is the big deal that we are seeing right now. That's the biggest challenge. We're starting to translate our training materials into other languages, including Spanish. We're having many workers, high growing percentage coming from Central America, specifically Guatemalan workers, and they speak a native Mayan dialect called Quiche. And so we've worked with translators, and we've translated the materials into that native language. And then there are other languages that we are now starting to see. And so with the whole immigration dynamics that are going on right now, it wouldn't surprise me to start seeing some other languages being spoken. And so we need to, work around that and come up with effective training materials. And even OSHA requires that all safety training materials to be presented in a manner that the workers can understand. And if that means that they speak another language, those training materials need to be delivered in that different language. And so that presents a challenge. And so I know many producers do not have often the resources to do this themselves. So I would encourage, we have a network of ag centers across the country that are there willing to help. And so based on wherever the listeners are on this call, I can point you in the right direction. You can contact me, or I can hook you up with a ag center in different parts of the country that can provide you training materials for the farm. And so there's help out there. Don't think that you have to do this alone. I know that National Milk has put together some very nice training materials as well. We've got colleagues at Idaho Dairy Association that has a really nice safety toolkit that they have recently put together. And all the ag centers have resources as well. And so you don't have to go about this alone. And so let us help you. That's what we do. That's our job.
Yeah, and just a shameless plug for the farm program. So we have gathered, Nicole and Sage have worked to gather a lot of those training resources on our website, and under our resource tab, you can find those. Again, if you're looking for a starting place or looking for information to plan out those different training opportunities. So next question I have, and this is the last question I have slated. So for folks who are listening in, if you have some questions, feel free to go ahead and plug those into the chat or the Q&A feature. The last question on my side, can you speak a little bit about retraining opportunities? Is training something that's just one and done as far as safety training? What does that look like going forward?
No, it is not a one thing. And I always say safety training and safety education is not a checkbox. I know a lot of businesses think that all we have to do is check the box. We've done our part, but you have to go back to the original intent as to why you are, or why a business would be delivering training to their workers. It's to get them to provide them the information to do their job effectively, productively, and in a safe manner. And sometimes you have to reinforce that training, deliver it in a different mechanism, talk about it on a daily basis, even if it means a 1 or 2 minute talk before the shift. That is reinforcement. You need to reinforce and talk about these safety issues on a regular basis. That will eventually facilitate a safe, a proactive safety climate among workers, to where they are working, or they are looking out for one another. They're looking for hazards. They're correcting hazards on the farm. And so it really does promote a safe working environment. So reinforcing is huge. Another issue on that question is a lot of farms experience high turnover among workers. And so that means you're continuously having to train the workers. And so that means you have to come up with an efficient and effective method to deliver the safety training content on a regular basis. And so I recognize that that's a challenge. I do understand that. But when you have workers, when you have a turnover that's high among your workers, that means you have to do a lot of safety training, safety education.
And then moving over to our audience questions, and this first question is maybe a little, this scenario may be a little specific, but maybe we can refer to it in broader terms. But the question is specifically asking about bulls and the threat that they bring on a dairy farm. And sometimes people underestimate how a bull may act unexpectedly, or the danger that's around that, and employees or owners, whoever, may not heed the warnings to stay away. So do you have any advice, maybe looking beyond specifically a bull, but folks who aren't following directions are not believing that there is danger? Any advice for helping them understand why that's important?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, we're seeing an increased number or a growing percentage of dairy workers that are coming from non-farming backgrounds. And so they did not have a background or the experience to truly appreciate the power of a bull and the dangers associated with a bull. And so, they don't know how to recognize, when a bull is showing signs of aggression. And so I recommend on farms just to, isolate the bull from workers to the best of their ability. That includes the necessary structures, but also putting up signage. Just put up signage all around where bulls are being kept. And it's a good reminder to them. But then also keep reinforcing to the workers that, these are dangerous animals and people have died. And I like to use actual newspaper reports or actual events that took place where workers were either injured or they were killed on a farm because of a bull. And so that is one of those issues. Dairy bulls are notorious for causing worker health and safety problems, and we need to recognize it and appreciate the fact that they can cause injuries, and we need to design out the structures, but then also educate workers as well.
Thanks. And we are getting a little close on time, but I think we can add in one more question. If a farm is looking for a starting point topic-wise, what are the priority areas or the biggest areas of improvement as far as farm safety that you would encourage folks to use as their starting point?
Well, first you need to recognize what the situation is. Do you have an injury and illness problem? So that means if OSHA were to come in and they were, for whatever reason, and there are a number of reasons why that would start an investigation or a visit, they're going to want to look at your injury and illness records. That will be one of the first things that they look at. So I always tell producers to start there. And OSHA has a number of different resources online on how to begin an injury and illness record keeping program. Second is start identifying what the hazards are on the farm. That means going around, walking around on the farm, trying to identify what could happen that could result in a worker injury or fatality. Recognize those, ask the workers, get the workers involved in the process. The more that they are involved in the safety program, the more buy-in that they have in the program, and they're going to own it. They want to participate in things like this. And then when it comes to safety training, not only starting the safety training program that is focused around those areas that need to be addressed, but then you need to be documenting that your workers have received the safety training. It's not only to demonstrate their competence and their participation in the program, but it also is a mechanism for you to document your due diligence in addressing worker health and safety. That's the starting point. And so having them sign off on the safety training not only proves that that is one way for you to prove that you're addressing worker health and safety, but you're also holding workers accountable to work in a manner that is according to your safety rules and regs on the farm.
All right, well, we are a little over time, and I know we had a little bit of late start, so apologize to those people listening in. But Dr. Douphrate, I want to thank you again for your time today and for sharing your knowledge. To reminder to our attendees that these sessions are recorded and will be posted on our website, along with the links and some of the references that we discussed today. Hope that you guys will tune in next month where we'll be with the Zoetis team talking about Antibiotics 101. Thank you all for your time today, and everyone have a good rest of your week. Bye, guys.